bringing pharma manufacturing to the US won't really help the US very much. It's not that many jobs. Every little bit counts, right? Oh, Corcept really bleeding here. Portfolio up 1.1%. Where'd my AVXL go? There it is, 770. Okay, so I'm starting to trace back some of my old knowledge, but oh yeah, here's what you have to do. You have to go to the Greek patent office. Let's try that. Let's see what this does. This freepatentsonline.net, we have it. Love freepatentsonline.net. No, this is a US patent application. There's a WIPO patent possibly here. Yeah, this is the US, but let me see if I can find the Greek patent. Inventor, how'd the inventor change? Oh, this is a different patent, okay. This references the Greek patent, presumably. That's why it's coming up in a search. I might not be able to find it because it's in Greek, but I could go to the Greek patent office, so. The reason this is important is I'm pretty sure that the original patent discloses that the molecule came from somewhere else. And the other way to look at this is what I did a second ago here, just looking for the furan methanamines, but I thought they're furane methanamines. Well, it's a 2010 application here, but that's well after he had Anavex support. Okay, he's referencing a 1995 paper of his own and a 1994 paper of his own. Adamantine. This is the Parkinson's drug. It's amantadine, not adamantadine. But this says adamantamine. Adamantamine. Is that misspelled? Isn't it amantadine? It's got that memantine chair bond. All right, I think it's just a different way to spell it, but it's not the right way. So he took the well-known, it's the same thing as you can see, well-known amantadine, or in his language, adamantine. Yeah, this is amantadine. This is the pure and this is the salt form. But regardless, these were well interrogated for Parkinson's. And he just made, I guess, a prodrug? No, it's not a prodrug. It's a totally different structure. Going back to his patent. But in essence, I mean, if these are isosteric, because this adamantyl group is just replaced with cyclohexane or benzene. Okay, so he did adamantyl, benzene, propanamines, and same thing here, 3-cyclopentyl, 1 adamantamines. I just kept making derivatives. Adamantine is similar to memantine, which is right. And memantine is as you guys probably know, the FDA approved for Alzheimer's. It's very, very weak. So I think, he was basically just trying to take adamantine, which was never approved for Alzheimer's, was approved for Parkinson's. Memantine, which was approved for Alzheimer's, and maybe try to, improve its efficacy. This is closer to blarcamesine, right? And the theory is maybe that's just isostery. You're not getting anything. You're not getting much out of. So that's the furan. Trying to go back in time and tease out this pathway of invention that 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙 097. This should be searchable. They said, here's like, it's like a patent rejection sort of, yeah, basically, where it says, however, Anavex 273 is not inventive as substantiated by the prior patent. You can't invent something twice. It's kind of a key concept of intellectual property. And you can try everything. Patent the metabolite, patent this, patent that, almost. Why can't I find this patent? I have to go into my MIT archives. Okay, this looks like it. So this is the original patent. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. Tetrahydro-NN dimethyl-2,2-diphenyl-3 furane methanamine. Present invention relates to a new and original molecule of anticonvulsant, okay, not Alzheimer's, antidepressive, not Alzheimer's, and nootropic activity. I don't know if that's Alzheimer's or not, but regardless. And to a process for its preparation. The anti-epileptics, currently used have a negative effect on memory. Who said anything about epilepsy? None of them exhibit simultaneous anticonvulsant, antidepressant, and nootropic activity. Why would you want antidepressants in epilepsy? I guess extra boost, why not? According to this invention, such a molecule has been found. Okay, none other than the molecule just mentioned. It's in enantiomers and their salts. Compound may be prepared as follows. Methods well known in the art. We got the melting point and so forth. Here's how you make it. Mix it up some more, mix it up further. These are the aminolactones and their tetrahydrofuran analogs. Beta aminolactones. Okay, so we'll go through the synthesis to see kind of what he was thinking, because I think the synthesis will sometimes reveal the mental model. And he's saying that displayed anti-GABAergic action, but in contrast, in the in vivo experiments in mice or rats, no anti-glycinergic activity was observed. Atropine precipitated convulsions, strong displacement on muscarinic. And they published that and they discussed that in papers. He was gunning for epilepsy here. And there's Alzheimer's, the nootropic action. There's a 1985 paper that seems to be worth reading there, but so this is the original. I think if you look at the history of muscarinics in Alzheimer's, they haven't done well. So what I think they did is they basically invented a new mechanism and said, well, it's sigma now too. It's not muscarinic, don't worry about that. One of the problems with the muscarinics is they have central acting effects. So I'm just trying to see real quick. Blarcamazine, pretty sure, yeah, it's pretty good. This is very fat soluble. It's all very Lipinski-like. Good log P, hydrogen bond donors and acceptors look right. The topological polar surface area is pretty small. It's like maybe too small. This is kind of the problem that Cassava's drug had, right? You had no reactivity. You have the furan, which is going to form a hydrogen bond. And you have the nitrogen, and I don't know what receptor is going to take this and say this is a really good fit. So we're going to have to dock these and see if we can dock this to sigma as well. But this is drug's a little too small. Modern drugs are like 300 molecular weight is just not kind of what you want. You want at least a little more reactivity. In my opinion, that's the kind of drugs I make. You may disagree, but it meets the rule of 5. I think if you want like a specific, really solid molecule that fat soluble is just important for blood-brain barrier and to get across lipid bilayers, you need log P. That's good. If you have a polar drug, but there's basically no such thing. Polar drugs just aren't. If you're too polar, you're not going to get in the cell. Rule of 5 is Lipinski's rule of 5. Huntington's is a bit of a wasteland. I should buy this company. Not a best business, but I just love drugs too much, man. Chemistry, medicine, that's my thing. A lot of the drama in the stock market now revolves around Tesla, and it's really, it's like holding up a mirror. What do we want? I hate to get philosophical. Soros is very philosophical. What do we want from the market? And there's a tug of war between the people that want to believe you can have a generational entrepreneur that's going to do unbelievable things, and that's worth $1 trillion, and you're supposed to suspend disbelief about this, basically backward-looking things like financials. And people like Bezos proved financials are backward-looking. Elon Musk is at the forefront of AI, robotics, and other high technologies. How can you bet against him? He's going to figure it out. He's going to make lots of money from whatever it is he's working on. But the other side of the tug of war, on the other side of the rope, are people who are saying, great, but I'm not going to pay for that. You got to show me. There's a lot of great technologists. 𝗂𝗑urzweil. The other side's going to say, well, 𝗂𝗑urzweil never made $1 trillion company. And the other side of the rope says it shouldn't be $1 trillion company. And the other side of the rope says, no, he look at all the revenue Tesla has. Tesla's got a lot of revenue, a lot of earnings. They've done really well. You've probably ridden in a Tesla. And the other side says, yeah, but, Ford and Toyota are just as good, and they're worth, so little. How can Tesla be worth so much? And the tug of war will continue. What you are probably asking of yourself or of me or others is, well, who's going to win the tug of war? And I don't know that that's the right answer or the right question. I would ask the opposite question, which is, who do we want to win the tug of war? Who are you going to let win the tug of war? Because as a market, we decide. If the earnings of a company have to be contemporaneous with the stock price, we'd have a very different stock market, right? It'd be highly arbitrageable. You could buy the stock of a company that just got FDA approval for a drug, has no earnings, but earnings are about to explode. Say it's a cure for some disease, right? You know the earnings are going to come. It's basically preordained. So that's kind of like what Tesla is. You know, there's this assumption that the earnings are going to come someday. But the tug of war, one of the sides wins when, well, you know, earnings are not going up this year as fast as you might think. It's going to be maybe next year. And they say, aha, this is what I've been saying all along. The earnings are not going to go up. And this promise of next year, well, there is no next year. That's a lie too. They lied about this year and they're lying about next year. Earnings are never going up again. And the other side has faith and says, no. We believe in our guy. You know, he's going to do just fine. And, you know, you basically have a tug between faith and reason, which is like, maybe more meta than we wanted. But that's why it's hard to pick this, because you're dealing with this very meta concept of, you know, you don't know which side is right. Right now, the side that's pulling on the earnings stuff, you know, it certainly seems to be right that Q1 was a doozy. Big decline in shipments and deliveries and production for Tesla. But we've seen what Musk has done over the last 20 years. Pretty impressive. So I don't know that he's not going to figure it out. So which side? You know, and a lot of the market is fixated with this exact question right now. And on days when the recession could be looming and equities are overvalued, Tesla slips. On days when there's reasons to be optimistic and we're excited about innovation, Tesla's rising. Like today is up 4%. One thing I'll tell you, you know, kind of as a value investor, is what I care about a little bit. This is more about a method for investing, not about whether I'd be long or short or whatever. This method for investing is, okay, let's say you have a stock, or this is a company, and this is what I'd call the margin of safety. This is not the price. This is different. This is the margin of safety. What is this, anyway? So this, to me, is kind of like the value, the permanent value of the company. What does that mean? In pharma, we actually don't get this, which is frustrating. And permanent value is kind of the moat. And this is the earnings that you can kind of rely on for a long time. For Coca-Cola, that's like basically the whole company. But we'll get to that in a second. So this is the stock price. And maybe we're here right now, I don't know. This isn't supposed to be representative of Tesla exactly, obviously. And so the question is, for the black part, you can kind of assume that you're going to be right. You can, I'm sorry, when you're in the black part, you have permanent value that you can sort of sit on and say, I can be long because it's worth, you know, this many times earnings, and it's very stable, and the price supports kind of the value supports the price. When Tesla's all the way up here, you're sort of saying, okay, well, the car business is worth this much, but, you know, the stock's worth a lot more. So either I'm making the wrong assumption about the car business, or there's something else coming, but, you know, this price doesn't really correspond to reality just yet, as far as I can see empirically. And then there's other stocks where what you see is what you get, and that these lines are superimposable in essence. You know, the value of Coke is largely been built up over some, you know, decades, and it's sort of reached an asymptote. And the price of Coke, interestingly, I remember this, believe it or not, kind of overshot this. And Buffett famously said that one of his biggest mistakes was not selling in that period, because this is one of the core dilemmas of and sort of advanced value investing is, if you have a compounding machine, should you ever sell? And Buffett's publicly said no in the past. And I think that the reality is some others have said, and including Buffett, have said yes. There is a price that's too high for everything. Coca-Cola is a wonderful compounding machine on its return on equity and its return on assets and things like that. The so-called Buffett return I've described a few times. You're not getting the price of the original owner. Even if you are the original owner, there is a price that's sort of saying, I'm going to, like this was like 30, 40 times for Coke. And Coke was not growing. It made no sense. This was roughly 2002. And on the assets, like, okay, so this is the Coke plant. This cost, $7 billion in CapEx to create and to maintain. And this was generating $7 billion of cash flow a year. That's 100% return on assets. Well, that's wonderful, but how does that help you as a stockholder? Because the stock's at, 200 billion market cap. Do you really want to pay 200 billion for 7 billion? You cannot increase this return, otherwise they would. And that was the sort of folly of Buffett. And I think he said it was one of his biggest mistakes. Is great, this compounding is fantastic, but I already got the benefits of that. And I cannot compound exactly. I'm only just going to get this 7 billion every year. Now I'm going to get the 7 billion and I could buy back this guy at a certain price. Is this a sale? At $1 trillion, is it a sale? And the previous message was, no, at no price could it be a sale. And the new message is, at the right price, it's a sale. There's no business quite like Coca-Cola, it's true. But there is a price that, having a reliable cash flow stream, there are other reliable cash flow streams out there. Maybe you'd argue there's none quite as reliable as Coke, but okay, discount a $7 billion annuity at 1% risk. That's worth 700 billion, right? It's cash flow divided by discount rate. So 2%, it's 50 times, which is 350. And at 3%, you're at 3% discount rate, which you can get from bonds and other things. So is Coca-Cola safe? Sure, but is it safer than a bond? A senior secured bond in the US government? No, it's not as safe as that. So it's overvalued. So this is a philosophical question. Now, getting back to the point of Tesla, there are markets and situations where investors largely, the investors with the marginal capital remaining are only investors who are sort of comfortable living in the black zone. In high risk markets, they're investors with flush with cash that are comfortable living in the orange zone. And that's why they are living in the orange zone. That's why the price of Tesla is 100 plus times earnings, because there are people willing to buy it and sell it at that price. When capital evaporates in a big market crash or a fear or panic, whatever, the only people who have capital, like Paul Singer at Elliott and other value investors like Buffett, they don't buy stocks in the orange zone. They only buy stocks in the black zone. So the prices have to go to the black zone. So this is really, when I describe that tug of war, it's really a philosophical question more than it is like a question with an answer. In essence, you could argue that it's an M1, M2 question, an M3 question. It's a money supply question. Is there money? If people have money, they will do stupid things with it. They will invest. They will speculate. They'll buy IonQ and Rigetti and D-Wave. But they'll also buy good companies like Tesla. Tesla's a great company. Elon's maybe the best entrepreneur ever. And I say that with a huge ego. What you're really asking is, when will the money supply change? Because that's really what matters. And sometimes when you're looking at these stocks, what's more important is, what is their ability to capture people's imaginations? That's why quantum rallied, right? That's why all these quantum stocks are up a lot. They're capturing people's imaginations, and there's tons of cash. Tons of cash. No unemployment, so people had money from that. Rising prices and everything, so people had money from that. And so you had companies that are talking about a new kind of computing. Well, you missed the old kind of computing. That was called NVIDIA, parallel computing. You probably missed the first kind of computing, the x86 in the 80s, 90s. You maybe weren't even born yet. So you say, I want the next kind of computing, and that's quantum computing. Okay, great. Now, whether that's true or not doesn't matter, because you're looking to gamble. You're looking to speculate. And when people take the money away, you can't speculate. There's no money to speculate. You need money for pharmaceuticals. You need money for rent. You need money for surgery. You need money for a rainy day. Maybe it is a rainy day. You need money for a hurricane. It's when it's bad out there, you can't buy stocks. Why? You might say, well, I save money more. No, I'm not talking about you. When in 2008, my partner and I, Marek, we're sitting in his attic, studying stocks every day. I was basically unemployed. My hedge fund had not done well. Like I said, I made a big bet that the market would crash in '07. I was wrong because it crashed in '08. And it was too early. So I was licking my wounds, like a cat. Sitting there with Marek, reading Munger, reading Buffett, forming this philosophical framework that would carry me forward. We started trading and betting with the money we did have, but we didn't have money from institutions. We didn't have money from big backers like CalPERS. Our big backers said, or my big backers, I should say, said, you bet on this market crash and you were wrong. You had the right idea, but it didn't work. So that's that. But the funny thing is, every other fund had the same problem. People took money out from Citadel. Citadel was down 50% at that time. My boss, a Tiger Cub, who had done marvelously, he was up all the time, but he wasn't up enough. He had good returns, which was really hard to do in that environment, but he was up, 10% or 12%, stuff like that. And they said, we need that money too. This is New York firefighters, New York pension, Port Authority, guys like that. These guys put 10, 20, 30, $40 million in hedge funds. You don't. You might put $1 million in a hedge fund, maybe. So, those guys needed their capital, and they said, give me the capital back. So even a guy like that who had 2 or 3 billion, now he's got 2 or 300 million or something like that. I don't know exactly. And Citadel, who had, 20 billion, now he's got 10 or 8 or whatever. And they're looking at stocks and they're saying, wait, we're deep in the black zone. We're deep in the black. We don't need to speculate. We're paying 2 or 3, 4, 5 times earnings for this stuff. But the point is they don't have capital. There's no capital around for people to buy the stocks. Everyone knew they were cheap, but there's nowhere to buy. I wish I had a couple $100 million I could trade with, where I could go buy Procter & Gamble for 8 times earnings, and J&J for 10 times earnings, and Pfizer I calculated was around 5 times earnings for the base portfolio. Of course, it was a no-brainer. You don't have to be Warren Buffett to see that. But nobody had the capital that they were willing to risk. They were willing to buy treasuries. They weren't really willing to buy stocks. Stocks had just got decimated. We didn't know the future. We didn't know if there was going to be a banking system. So we're in that black zone. And right now, we're sort of still in this orange zone, probably high in that orange zone, in my opinion. We're starting to come down closer to the black area. And having capital is important right now. And avoiding speculation, deep speculation, is also important. And I feel like it's more important sometimes, we were talking about macro earlier, to know, am I buying speculation or am I buying reality? Now, I don't focus on this, right? I focus on what's real and what isn't. Well, the thing is, when things are real, maybe they'll go from the top of the orange to the top of the black. And when things are not real, maybe they'll go from the top of the orange to the bottom of the black. So you'll get some separation. But when things are good, the crappy stocks tend to be in favor, right? You want the crappiest stock you can find because the dumbest people are going to speculate on it. And the smart people are going to basically just get out of the way. They're not going to keep the price honest. And we've seen that, right? We've seen that 100 times with these stocks. Fartcoin is up lately. So if there's money flowing, it'll behave both intelligently. It'll buy good stocks and good companies and fund new ventures and things like that. But it'll also behave irrationally because humans are irrational. And people who missed a boat get FOMO. They get greedy and they want to chase the next thing.